All right, on a wet Tuesday, again, we'll keep you updated if anything weather-wise breaks, but you've heard us all morning talking about the flooded streets around town. Just be smart, everybody, as we welcome in Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Good morning, Sam.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you?
Good. We got just hammered with rain here. How are the Lincolnites this morning?
We got hit too. Not the same force. The storms developed like just west of like 84th Street. So the worst of it. You guys got hit with the worst of it, which is too bad. That's happened 3 or 4 times now in the last month, where Omaha's got hit with some really severe storms. So yeah, I hope. I know the power went out for some of the spots up there.
Hey, let's dive into a couple of things here, and I went back and listened. So, Dr. Susan Elza, who's the right hand man for Matt Rule, I think is a fascinating person on her journey to get to where she is, and she's kind of a trailblazer. But it seems like every time her name gets brought up, Sam, by either her boss or somebody else, we realize how much of an impact she has. She
Oh yeah,
she said the other day that we are not afraid to talk about Nebraska's goal, and that is a national championship. Now,
yeah.
we have had administrators that have talked like that, but we rolled our eyes or thought, what the heck? And then it came back to bite you. She says
Right.
that, and what's your reaction?
Well, I think I think she's very sincere in saying that, and I think Matt Rule is too. And I do appreciate the sincerity. I think what they have in mind is a real goal for them, and I also think that their what they want to do, the way they want to build it, is commensurate with their goal. And so I do think that, like, even though Matt Rule wants to win right away, don't all coaches? I think their vision is commensurate with where they want to go. So they want to develop, and they want to get young guys in, and they want to take the time to do it right. So they want to slow cook the meal a little bit, and they're not afraid to add some transfers. But I don't know that that's like the primary vehicle for success. So they want to get guys in here, and then they want to develop them over the course of 3, 4, and 5 years, and they want to use their NIL to retain their best players versus necessarily going out and paying for a free agent. And I think those standards are probably what gets you title.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have some examples where Washington made it to the national championship game, and they don't make it there without the transfer quarterback. But Michigan won the national championship, and Michigan was pretty homegrown. They had a few offensive line transfers that helped them, but they were pretty homegrown. I think Georgia's pretty homegrown. Alabama is too. And so I think Nebraska's got the right idea in mind. What I think when I hear that is, well, get ready.
Yeah.
I'm willing to hold anybody to that standard if that's what they want, but then we'll talk real seriously about the components that come into play. And one of the components that come into play when you're talking about those kinds of things is you have to score points. There is a connective tissue since the 2011 Alabama team, which couldn't score at all, but had the best defense maybe in the last 30 years. But there's a connective tissue since then. You got to score points. So what they've got to do is make sure that the offense and all the coaches involved with that piece and all the players involved with that piece are dialed toward scoring points.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that and still play good defense. And so, what I'm going to do over the summer is here are the components that just being a Big Ten champion. And the Big Ten champions over the last 6 years have been Ohio State or Michigan. And here's what they've done in order to get there. And I think what people will find is that if you're now going to go win a Big Ten title, you have to beat Ohio State or Michigan or be a caliber of that team. And that means you got to score at least 31 points a game. So we'll see if Nebraska's up for that.
Sam, you brought up something there I thought was kind of interesting when it came to I like the way you use that. It's sort of the slow cooking process when it comes to this roster and this program. If you look at over the next couple of years, Nebraska continues to have that reputation as a team that is not going to go heavy out of the transfer portal. How far along do you think that does go in its effort to retain as well? Obviously, if you're retaining, you don't have to go in the transfer portal, but also guys that maybe are in that third tier, maybe they're battling to get on the two deep. They're seeing that, hey, they're not heavy into the transfer portal, so I still have that time to develop. Do you think that does help an effort to retain, especially the younger developmental projects that they hope to have a lot of?
Yeah, I think they work in conjunction, Nick. So what I would say is you have to convince. The first thing you have to do is you have to make sure that the kids that you're recruiting from out of high school classes, that they're on a developmental pathway that keeps them at the school. And if you're able to do that, then you don't have to necessarily rely on more transfers. I think that's the starting point. And they've generally done that up to this point. There's been some guys who have left, but for the most part, those have been older guys. Guys that were either transfers who had joined the team that were older guys, or they were just older guys. And so I think, you want to be able to retain the guys that you have in your program for 2 to 3 years. You have to convince them that they're on the right track, even if they're not necessarily playing yet.
Yep.
And if you're able to do that, then you don't need the transfers. The challenge comes, and they'll run into this challenge, is when there might be, 7 to 11 to 13 guys that look around and say, listen, I like being here, but I also want to play. And I'm going into my redshirt sophomore season. And if I don't get it done now, then I'm stuck going to the portal, after 3 seasons of not playing here, and I don't know what my options will be. And so a lot of times kids will get through those first 2 years, a redshirt year, and then their redshirt freshman year. And they'll have, I call it the 2-year itch. They just get that 2-year itch. And you're going to see a whole group of players come into that 2-year itch here in December. We're going to see how many of them play.
Yep.
And we're going to see how many of them don't play and then subsequently leave. You're going to have a large batch of guys that fit that category, and we'll just kind of see what happens, because this will be rules. Yeah, and this will be rules third class, but he had a big group, right? 30 plus in the 2020, gosh, goodness gracious, 2023 class. A lot of those guys redshirt, a lot of them. And so, this is their year. And if they don't move up the depth chart into number two spots, what will they decide to do? And that'll be something I'm watching. They've got some skill players, for example, at corner or running back, and I think a receiver who might get jumped over by some of the guys they recruited in the 24 class, if that makes sense. I think that might happen. So we're gonna find out what happens. This is just my personal opinion, and I don't know anything. I thought the first class was a little too large, because I kind of felt like some of those guys, they didn't know that well and had just begun recruiting it, and I kind of felt like that class was going to end up losing some folks, whereas this 24 class seems pretty elite, from my perspective, just looking at it right now.
Hey, one of those guys in the 24 class showed up and showed out and wrapped up a heck of a athletic career. And we're talking about Carter Nelson with the state track and field. At some point this year, he competed in 9 different events, but he walks away with gold medals, and now he walks himself into Lincoln. Some of the guys that went through their entire senior year and did not enroll early are showing up now. Caleb Benning, Donovan Jones yesterday. Carter Nelson is on the way. What are the realistic expectations for him, Sam, in his first year in college, after this celebrated high school career in Ainsworth, but also Nebraska's attention to him? Give me a realistic expectation for him in year 1 on the field in the transition from 8-man to 11-man.
I think it's probably right on the line between 4-game redshirt and, well, maybe this guy can help us more than we think. And for what it's worth, multiple reporters, myself, Amy, others have kind of asked Carter about that, and he's given a pretty good answer. Like, he's not to contrast him with, say, maybe a Fedoni. Fedoni was like, I'm going in there and I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And if he hadn't gotten hurt, he probably would have. I think Carter's a little more cautious. Like, he said, well, I know that there's things I've got to work on. Obviously Carter is 200 pounds, 210 pounds. And so he's given some pretty thoughtful answers to that. And then I talked to Satterfield this spring before the before the spring camp, and he kind of said the same thing. We think he can help us win football games, but there was not a commitment to, oh, he's going to play right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you were to go and ask Garrett McGuire about Ja'Cory Barney, I think it would be, oh, he's going to play right away. Yeah, we see a guy that's going to, so long as he stays healthy, is just going to be up with us. Is that, he'll be up with the top groups. And I think if you were to, to talk to people about Prince Will Umanyalan last year, yeah, he's going to be up with us. I don't know that Carter, I think Carter's probably right on that line. And it'll be interesting to watch where he's at. I can tell you this too. They're real excited about Donovan Jones coming in, and I think they're going to be really curious to see if he can accelerate his development. Donovan is probably the right size physically. He may be 5 or 10 pounds under, but not much. And his athleticism and his speed is going to put him in a position to potentially compete. It'll just be a question of learning the playbook. So there's some guys that are coming in late here that I think could still play a lot of football for Nebraska.
Sam, I know that you had wrote about this, and I know it was a big conversation, especially over the weekend, about where things stand with the stadium project too. You hear that certain aspects of it have slowed down, especially the South Stadium, but also, and Gary and I talked about this yesterday, whether you got chairbacks, whether you've got a lot of leg room or not, if you win, people will trade being uncomfortable for a winning product. But what you heard on Friday, to you, what does that mean for the future of Memorial Stadium, say in the next 5 years?
I think some of it's contingent on how the team does. I think you can get the East and West stuff done, and that'll probably happen no matter what. I know they've got to do some reseating, and they've got to attach seat licenses to some of the seats. There's currently some really good seats that don't have those donation fees because they were grandfathered in probably back in the Bill Byrne era, and they're going to redo that, which is fine. I think that's probably overdue. The South Stadium renovation is going to cost money no matter whether you do it in stages or you do it all at once. And if in order to reduce the amount of public money that you ask for, which is a little fraught in this financial climate, it's just not easy to do. You're going to have to probably have a scenario where, the demand is high and the donor base is excited about the direction of the program. And I don't know that that's going to be something they're going to gauge this fall. Like, I have no doubt that they're going to have some sort of idea because they're turning the architects toward East and West. So they're going to address that first, and then they'll get back to South Stadium. And by then we will have 2 or 3 more years of resume of Matt Rule. Now, if you were to ask me what I think is going to happen with Rule, I think it's on an upward trajectory. I do. The question will be, how much upward trajectory? Are we talking a 10, 11 wins, which I think is possible, or are we talking 7, 8 wins, which I think is going to happen at least? And so there's probably some room in there where, the enthusiasm will kind of determine what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. I agree that you've got about 5 to 7 more years of a fan base that's just kind of willing to show up no matter what.
Yep.
But then I think that's going to run out. I think I said that to your colleague Connor yesterday. Like, my generation, so I'm a late Gen Xer, and then starting with the late Gen Xers, early millennials, we're not probably predisposed to doing that as much. Like, we got the TV set up at home that we really like. We got our phone. Some people have a laptop, but most people got a phone. They got the cooler of their preferred drink sitting nearby. They got food they made or DoorDash, and it's better than what they can get in the stadium. So you're going to have to really up the experience level in South Stadium. And Troy was honest. I like talking to Dan. He's actually pretty calm. I really respect Trev Albert. Trev's an intense person. I think Troy's kind of been through some of the fires and kind of knows it. So he's a little bit calmer and just laid back. So he's able to say, like, we need to improve the concession offering. he was pretty blunt about that. And I understand exactly what he's talking about. It's Runza, it's Val's, it's hot dog, it's popcorn, it's nachos, and that's about all you get. you've got to offer some more things over there, including eventually beer.
We'll get chatter on this. So, is it too soon for you to get a read, or for us to get a read on the Dan and Rule relationship, or are you starting to see how that's going to work? Because I know the phrase "coach's AD" is used a lot. Too soon, or you have a feel of how these two are going to work together?
Not too soon at all. No, I think it's pretty clear that the two of them are going to work pretty well together, and that Dannon is in part here because of his good working relationship with Rule.
Mm-hmm.
So these two guys knew each other before he got here. I think they're cut from somewhat similar cloth. If you look at just the way that Dannon came up in the business, kind of the way that Rule came up in the business. I mean, people forget this, but Matt Rule spent the first 5, 6, 7 years of his career at Albright College in Western Carolina and Temple. And you don't go to those places and succeed as an assistant coach unless you're a grinder.
Yeah.
And Troy Dannon spent the first 20 years of his career as a high school official, and then he went to Northern Iowa, where again you're going and you're grinding, you're doing tough work there. So they're cut from the same cloth. I think that Rule is an aggressive, idea-based kind of guy, and he needs to be paired with an AD. And I think this was generally true of Trev, but he needs to be paired with an AD that's like, all right, let me hear your ideas and let's see if we can make them happen.
Yep.
And so I think Dannon's going to be in the mood to do that, and I think he's willing to do it. And I don't think Rule is unpragmatic about his idea set. He is not the person who would say, let's put a really cool waterfall here, and I don't care how much that.
Yeah.
He would say, let's put something that costs $1 million, but I can tell you why that's a good thing to have. Doesn't mean he's always going to get his $1 million thing, but he'll make a good case for the things that he wants to get done. And I'll tell you what, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to go, but that includes grass.
Ooh.
Which would be a big change inside Memorial Stadium. But I do think that long term would be a possibility and a preference. And I've long been a proponent of that. I don't know that it's going to happen, and I don't know what timeline it would be. But Rule has talked about that, and
yep.
I think other schools do it. Iowa State does it, and it looks great. Iowa State field looks great, and Michigan State does it, and their field looks pretty good. Purdue's field is kind of strange, but I guess it works. So there's northern climates that have grass fields, and I don't really know why Nebraska couldn't be one of them.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting development. It's just the difference of looking at down the road from a Trev vision to a Troy vision. I absolutely agree with you. Sam, as always, we appreciate it. Have a great week.
Take care.
It's Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. I think the dynamic, Nick, is Trev was one of those